Would Diddy pledge allegiance to Donald Trump in return for a pardon?
I think you want to know the truth. I think yes.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, I had your colleague, Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead lawyer, on TMZ Live yesterday. And he kind of dropped something really interesting. Home confinement instead of prison for Diddy. And here's the way it came up. I asked him about whether Diddy was getting therapy for anger management and for substance abuse. And he said there was already a plan to engage professionals from the outside. And as soon as I heard him say outside, I was ready. And I asked him, well, wait a minute. Does this mean because on the outside, you're saying you can get better treatment than on the inside? And if you're already looking for people, the way I'm connecting the dots is that you're going to ask for home confinement so he can get therapy to help him rehabilitate himself. And he said, well, yeah, possibly. He's such a good lawyer. I don't think the word possibly is the right answer for this. I think certainly is the right answer.
Well, remember in federal court, when you have the sentencing guidelines and which are no longer, you're no longer constrained, but they're advisory, as you know, if you look at the guidelines on this case, the guidelines are very low and arguably should be very low, given that the judge was the one who ordered that they kind of survey all past cases to see if they've ever come up with a comparable situation. I don't know that anybody's come up with anything that's comparable. And when I say that, what I mean is where you have been convicted of a Mann Act violation, you're sitting in custody, and the facts around it are that a male was transported across state lines to have a sex act, but not with you. So that's a pretty unique situation. Given that situation, the sentencing guidelines, contrary to what the prosecution was arguing the day of the acquittals, remember they stood up then. Yep. Maureen Comey had said, I think she said 41 to 50 months or 50 to 61 months or something in that range, which I thought was way above where the guidelines are. I think the guidelines here are somewhere in that 20-month range. All of that is a long way of saying, if you go below that, which arguably you should in this case because of the unique facts that I just said, that generally gives you a split sentence. That's what they call a split sentence in federal court. Split sentence would be you do a period of confinement and then a period of home arrest. So you were there. You got it. A split sentence should be he should be out. He will have done a year at the time of sentencing if the president does not intervene, and that the remainder of that sentence should be done at home, under home confinement.
Oh my gosh, that is so interesting because what Agnifilo was talking about was supervised confinement. And I thought to myself, I can't remember the exact term, is supervised, but what he was insinuating was that it would be part of a sentence, almost like a halfway house, and that's exactly what you're saying. That
correct. There's a slight difference between, obviously more than a slight difference, but you have a halfway house, which is generally when you've been sent to prison, and then before you get released, a lot of times there'll be that way station, which is a halfway house, depending on how much time is spent, things of that nature. But in a situation where you've got time in, and he has a considerable amount of time in, if you follow the guidelines or go below the guidelines, then you're looking at a sentence that he'd be released under supervised release, which is what a lot of people would normally understand to be probation, and then on condition of home confinement. I had, for instance, last year, a client who was given home confinement and did not do time in custody, but was given home confinement for a 6-month period of time and was put on the monitor, basically, and had terms and conditions. You can go to church, you can go to medical appointments, things of that nature.
That totally makes sense now that I think back to the interview. So what he's saying is Diddy will have put in almost a year behind bars. And
more than a year.
And if he gets 2 years, Agnifilo actually said 2 to 3, but I think it's somewhere between 1.5 and 3. But even
it's funny you say 1.5 and 3. The way I calculate the sentencing guidelines, I think it's between 20 and 27 months if he doesn't get something to go below that.
Right. So if he splits the difference, I mean, theoretically, Diddy, if the judge buys this supervised release, which clearly now Mark even mentioned supervised release specifically in my interview with him. So that's what he's talking about. So basically saying, essentially give him time served behind bars, send him home. He'll be under home arrest, essentially home confinement for the duration of that, whether it's another 12 or 15 months or whatever. So that's what he's asking for. And that's why they've already assembled this team of professionals to give him therapy, right?
Well, the federal criminal defense lawyers who practice or the people who work in the federal system are going to email me and say, make it clear that there's always going to be supervised release, and that's I'll make that clear. But yes, there are. You could have a team of professionals. You could have.
Mark said it. Mark already said. He told me they're assembling a team of professionals.
You could cooperate with a plan that the court orders. I mean, there's a laundry list of conditions the court can order. That could be them. Look, you've heard me say this 100 times. I've known Sean for years, well over a decade. I think you can directly correlate the violence in his life to the periods of time when he was struggling with substance abuse. I think there is a direct correlation. I think that he recognized that. I think he said it. I think after the 2016 incident when he hit rock bottom, he got and understood he had a problem. So if you're looking at this holistically, globally, and I know there's always going to be the people who say, no, there's no forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. Understand something. He was acquitted of the mandatory minimum counts. So a judge has to sit there and say to himself, okay, I know what he was convicted of. The whole mandate of being a federal judge is no disparity in sentencing, which is why, in my opinion, I haven't talked to him, obviously, except that one time where he said he was subscribing to Watch You and Me. But the no disparity in sentences is why His Honor issued an order that said, give me a survey of similarly situated cases. I want to make sure that I don't engage in some kind of disparity, that I don't, he didn't say this, but I would say, if I was sitting on the bench, I would say, just because the prosecutor gets up here and starts saying 50 to 60 months, or we're going to do considerably more, are they doing that because that's what the guidelines call for, or are they doing that because they're sore losers?
Okay, so we need to talk about two other things. We need to talk about how baby oil ended up being the most powerful thing in his defense, and then we need to talk about a possible pardon. But before we do, I just want to call you out on something. You were saying, I know there are people who say that what he did is unforgivable, but the jury acquitted him. Yeah, the jury acquitted him, but you got to understand that the public doesn't have to base its evaluation only on a jury verdict, because the Cassie video wasn't on trial there. And there are people who are looking at that saying, I don't care what a court did or didn't do. I don't care what a prosecutor did or didn't do. What I care about is what Diddy did. And that I saw it with my own eyes. And I heard testimony that seems consistent with it. So I don't think you can dismiss people who have that opinion. It's sort of like you got to live with that opinion, but not dismiss it like, oh, well, the jury found him not guilty on those 3 counts. this case involves more than those 3 counts for the public. And he needs to deal with the public.
I agree, but that is for the PR people, that is for crisis managers, that's for a different, that's not the judicial.
I know, but I'm just saying you made a comment where you just kind of dismissed it.
Well, I dismiss it in this sense. They use that video, in my humble opinion, is the only reason he was tried in this case. I don't think he ever would have been filed on but for that video. And I think that the prosecutors made that the centerpiece of their prosecution, even though that was not what he was charged with. By the way, if he was charged with that, it would have been in the, I believe, the city of Los Angeles. It would have been a misdemeanor filing, and the statute of limitations.
No way would that have been a misdemeanor, Mark. Mark, come on.
I'm telling you right now, Mark, that's why the statute, Harvey, I'm telling you, it's a horrific video.
It's a felony. It's a felony. There are injuries. You know that's a felony.
I'm telling you, if you did not have a complainant, you didn't have a complainant, Harvey. Just remember that. You did not have somebody going to the police to make a report. You had no investigation on that. You had an investigation after the fact.
But you said if they prosecuted. I'm saying 50%.
They wouldn't have prosecuted. The only way they would have prosecuted, let me just explain it. You can jump all over it. I'm giving you the what the prosecutors would have said. If the prosecutor had that tape, if they had that tape in real time or within the statute of limitations, and they had no complainant, they're not going to file that as a felony.
50% of the cases that involve domestic violence in the LA County DA's office are with non-cooperative victims, and they still prosecute, and they get a 90+% conviction rate. So I disagree with you.
But do you want to go down the road a little bit on that? They have a non-cooperative. When was the person non-cooperative? That means at the time you go to trial or go to a preliminary hearing. I'm telling you, if you didn't have a complainant in real time, that you would not have a felony complaint. That's
I disagree, but you know what just struck me?
What?
If Diddy wasn't prosecuted by the feds and the tape came out, he would be in a worse position, way worse than he is now, because the Southern District of New York filed charges, made such a big deal about this, and lost. Diddy can claim victory. If they never filed and the tape came out and it was a standalone, he never could ever resurface, I think.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that, look, if this is a perfect example, and I think will be a textbook example looking forward to see how he deals with it. I mean, I think one of the reasons, he was excoriated in some quarters for that apology that he did, the apology tape, which I think you were one of the first, or your outlet was one of the first to put up. After that tape surfaced, he knew in real time that was unforgivable. And I think, to quote Tenny in her opening statement, if that's what he was on trial for, he wouldn't have been on trial because he would have accepted it. That's not what he was on trial for in the strict legal sense. But to my point, and I think your point, that's why he was tried.
Yep. I agree with that. So, the other thing I talked to Agnifilo about that was just fascinating to me, I went back to 9 months before Diddy was tried, and we did a documentary on Diddy for Tubi, and I interviewed Mark, and Mark said to me when I was asking him about the baby oil, he said, 1,000 bottles of baby oil, I don't know, maybe he went to Costco just to get a supply or something like that. And he made light of it. And he was torn apart by the public and the media when he said that. And I was thinking, God, why did he say that? And now I know that he had a plan all along. And he delivered it in his closing argument. And I talked to him about this, and I said, look, and I said, it turned out the way I see it, that the best thing going for you was the baby oil, which everybody thought was the worst thing. The prosecution made such a big deal about it at their news conference, and the media made such a big deal, including TMZ, that, when it finally came time for the jury to hear the case, Agnifilo could scoff and say, wow, the streets are safer now that 70 Homeland Security agents seized baby oil. The streets are safer. And he literally looked at the jury and said, ooh. And he said he just did a line early on in the closing argument where he made fun of the baby oil, and the jury laughed. And he said, as soon as they laughed, I knew I had them. And then he just did like a one-man show about baby oil and Astroglide. And I gotta say that I didn't see that coming when I did that interview with him months before, but he planned this all along.
And by the way, what was the one time in a very serious opening statement that Tenney gave? One time,
baby oil.
That there was a laugh. What was the one time?
Baby oil.
Baby oil. And in an offhand remark, Tenney said, and we all know his, whatever it was, affliction or passion for baby oil, and got a laugh. And I've often said, if you've got a jury that's laughing, that's not a convicting jury.
Yeah. And it's so funny that in a weird way, that was, I mean, that's a turning point in the case, that the prosecution made such a big deal of it. And then the jury's thinking, okay, and then what? What does that show? And, and then to bring in Astroglide, it was Agnifilo's point all along when he kept saying, this is a bedroom police prosecution. And, I got to say, he's brilliant. Because when I did that interview, I knew he was talking about bedroom police, but I didn't connect all the dots when I was listening to him. And now it's really obvious to me that was his plan all along. It was just hammer home what they seized.
And by the way, the timing could not have been better, because you try this case in New York, you rest and do your argument, and then you go into Pride weekend. And I told you this before. I walked for hours to try and get through Pride weekend. Pride weekend on the streets of New York, which is like Mardi Gras on steroids. I mean, it's really one of the funnest things you've ever seen or experienced, at least I have. And then you go into jury deliberations on a Monday, and you're talking about, as one of the alternate jurors said, some rather tame sex tapes. And you say to yourself, what are we doing here? Why are we here? It really fits in with this idea of the, as you call it, the bedroom police. I mean, that's something that resonates with Americans. Americans don't want the government in the bedroom.
You're right. Talk to me about pardon, because I know, and I don't even think you're going to deny it, that the defense has been in touch with the White House and they have talked about this. I also obviously know, as everybody does, that Donald Trump did an interview where he said, Diddy didn't support me in the last election. He wasn't very nice, so it's kind of unlikely. So he didn't say no, but he certainly didn't say yes, and he seemed inclined not to.
He did say, I've watched that interview, and I've watched the previous back in May question. The interview was with Finnerty from Newsmax. Finnerty specifically asked him about it, and him being the president. And the president said, my people have talked to me about it, and I do know Sean, and I've known him for a long time, and we got along, not well, but something happened when I ran for office. That way he was very clear. Finnerty was the one who said, you mean, so it's unlikely? And the president said, well, I suppose, but then returned to it when they asked him about Santos, and said again, Santos's people, or Santos has not asked him, but his people, meaning the presidents, have talked to him about it. Let me make my argument, because I got into this kind of spirited discussion with Megyn Kelly. Megyn takes the position he should never do it. I take a different position. I think that they both were prosecuted, both the president and Sean were prosecuted in New York, both initiated under the previous administration. Both, in Sean's case, was Damian Williams, who then went on, who was basically auditioning to be the attorney general for Kamala, and had put on his website when he left the office that he went after Eric Adams and he went after Sean Combs. Both of them had RICO actions. Both of them were thought to be prosecuted by proxy, so to speak. And I think that if you ask Sean, I honestly believe this. I think if you ask Sean, he'd say, look, after being what I've been through, I get it. I understand. All the people who now say, why is Trump doing this? Why is Trump doing that? You have to go through a criminal prosecution and the hell that it puts somebody through to understand that you never really recuperate from that. And I think that that's true for the president, and I think it's true for Sean Combs. And so there's something that resonates there. I think that the president can say to himself, I've been there. I went through both civil and criminal cases that were kind of bullshit. And by the way, who was sitting next to him? The deputy attorney general was sitting next to him, Todd Blanche. So I'm not so sure that it's unlikely. I think that it's more than likely.
Yeah, but what you're missing is loyalty. That means everything to him. And he punishes his enemies and rewards his friends. And he may have been friendly with Diddy, but Diddy did not support him. And Trump remembers that and said he remembers.
Yeah, but then again, take a look at the people he ran against in the primaries and some of the things that he said, and then those people came back. Look at Marco Rubio. He used to call Marco Little Marco. Marco used to say horrible things. He came back.
Yeah, but he beat him. I mean, that was the saving grace. He beat him, and then Marco Rubio supported him.
Look at Sean. Sean's sitting in custody. Where did taking on Trump get him?
Well,
by the way,
not the same thing.
Well, where did supporting the Democrats get Sean? It didn't get him. He was one of the early guys on Obama. He was very supportive and said some things that I bet you he would take back now, having been through the system. I used to say that a Democrat was a Republican who'd been indicted. And now it's almost the opposite. It's a Republican, or Democrats are a Republican. There is, when you have this kind of a lawfare, for lack of a better term, I've never really embraced that. But when you use the criminal justice system for political purposes, I think that it really gives you insight into just how dangerous it is.
Would Diddy pledge?
What do you think? You don't think that at this point that the president would or should commute or pardon?
I think if he does it, it's going to be as a diversion to Epstein. And that, to me, is the biggest play that you have, is that Donald Trump needs a diversion. And he's trying everything under the sun, and it's not working. And Diddy might work, or at least he might think it would work, so that he would do it, because I think people would go nuts. And I think he wants them to, in a way that makes them not talk as much about Epstein. So that, to me, is the best thing for him. Let me ask you something.
Well, can I push back a little bit there?
Yeah.
There is an argument that Diddy is an Epstein prosecution by proxy. Once again, Damian Williams, Ghislaine Maxwell, the same prosecutor, Maureen Comey, was Ghislaine Maxwell, Ghislaine, and Diddy, and in the civil case, which we've talked about episodes past, there was the declaration to not release the matters pertaining to Epstein, while at the same time prosecuting Diddy and basically kind of look over here, not over here. I mean, there is an argument that but for Epstein, there wouldn't have been a Diddy prosecution. But for the Intercontinental tape, there wouldn't have been a prosecution of Diddy. And but for kind of all this brouhaha and what was going on in the Southern District, that he wouldn't even be in custody right now. And, by the way, if Donald Trump had not won the election, imagine where he'd be right now.
Oh, that's true. That's absolutely true. Be honest with me on this.
Okay. Only if you're honest when I ask you the question in back.
Okay. Would Diddy pledge allegiance to Donald Trump in return for a pardon?
I think you want to know the truth. I think yes. And do you know why? I don't know that it would be like a fealty oath or anything else. I think, having done this for 40 some odd years, what happens to people when they go through a criminal case? I've watched it. I can't remember the last time that a client didn't say to me after a criminal case, how do you do this for a living? How do you go through this? I remember clients saying they've made a caricature of me. The prosecutors have. There's something about that fraternity of people who have been accused and have gone through the process that gives you an affinity. And it would not surprise me to hear Sean say, I now get it. I understand it. And I was wrong then. And I don't know that I would say he's pledging loyalty, but I think he would probably say, I now get what he went through.
I know the defense has gone and talked to the White House. If I were to jump to a conclusion...
Didn't Agnifilo deny that yesterday?
I know it's happened, right? I mean, you and I know it's happened. So...
Well, I would say the president said, I'd be precise, the president said his people have talked to him. So, and by the way, I just so that people understand, back in May, I think it was Fox who asked in the Oval Office, what about Diddy? And the president said, I knew him. He hasn't asked me, and blah, 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 but he was thinking about it. You have to be under a rock not to have thought about it.
No, I understand, but there was communication, and I know this, and you know this too. And, maybe you won't answer this, but would I be jumping to conclusions to think that there wasn't a discussion about how Diddy would speak of the president in return for a pardon?
Well, I don't know that there's ever been that discussion. I can't go that far, but I would.
Really?
That, I would, but it would not.
For those of you listening, Mark just smiled.
Yes, I did. I smiled because I think people are somewhat naive about what happens when you're sitting in custody, having been tried, rolling the dice, winning, but still in custody. I just think there's a naive aspect to the idea that you wouldn't understand or have an affinity for somebody else who's been through the system. The system chews you up. Famously, the original Ray Donovan, Department of Labor, had said after he was acquitted on the courthouse steps, where do I get my reputation back?
Do I take that as I wouldn't be jumping to a conclusion?
No, I just don't think I would make it as quid pro quo that you've got to say something. I think there is an honest
wink.
I think there's an honest affinity for anybody who goes through the process with anybody else who's gone through it. Ask anybody famously who's been through the process whether or not they have empathy for somebody else who's been accused. It's a horrible thing to be accused.
No doubt. But then again, the question is, how much empathy does Donald Trump have for people who didn't necessarily support him, unless they say that they found religion and will if they get something in return?
He seems to me to be fairly forgiving. I don't know that he isn't forgiving. I mean, you'll say it's more transactional. I hear people saying it's transactional.
Yes.
I just think, look, the president said in that Finnerty interview, he said he doesn't want what was said to cloud his judgment. He said it. I didn't say it. Finnerty didn't say it. He said it. He wants to do what's fair. He also said he was found, what did he say? Half innocent. I think, frankly, it was 60% acquittal, 3 out of 5. So he's obviously talked to his people. He obviously sees that it's unfair. Anytime you have a verdict like this where somebody rolled the dice and was, they were trying to take away his net worth. I hadn't even talked about that. They tried to take away in the Todd Blanche case. You're trying to take away his net worth there as well.
I get it. I mean, sometimes I talk to you and you're such a lawyer. I can read through the whole thing. I can read through this whole thing.
I want to take credit for something.
What?
And here's the question. When we first started doing this podcast, were you an active lawyer?
Right around
No, you were not. You only activated your license after we started doing this. Think about it.
Yeah, I don't remember the timing, but maybe.
I do.
So
I
what?
remember
But so what?
I'm just going to say you can say you're a lawyer. You're now active.
I was a lawyer. When I was an inactive member.
You used to be. You were inactive. Now you're active.
Dude, you're a lawyer if you're a lawyer. Whether you're an active or inactive, you're a lawyer. Come on, give me a break.
I always think
oh my God. Are you serious?
Yes,
so this is what you're resorting to not to answer my question.
What was that? By the way, what was that TMZ clip that you used to play all the time about you being a lawyer?
I am a lawyer.
Okay. Well, now you're active. Now you're licensed.
No, I was a lawyer before, Mark. Give me a break.
When was the last time you had a case?
It doesn't matter. I did have cases, but
I know you did.
But that's,
how long ago?
Do you think
how long ago?
A long time ago? But
when you were on
I got out.
I know. When you were on Channel, you bailed. You were early money. When you were on Channel 2, were you active and were you practicing?
I was partly active, and then I thought, why am I still active? And at a point, I just said, this is ridiculous if I'm not practicing. So I went inactive.
How long did you practice?
And I saved some money. I taught law school for 6 years, and I practiced for a couple.
And what was the most serious case you ever tried?
Well, the funnest case I ever tried was... it's funny. I don't know. I don't want to go down memory lane too much, but I worked at a law firm in downtown LA, and I had taught law school right out of law school. I went down to Florida and taught at University of Miami for a year, and I loved it. And when I went to practice, I didn't like it as much. And I went to one of the partners and I said, look, I know the way this works here, and that if you are on the path to partnership, you basically have to do research for 5 years and you never see a courtroom. I'm not going to be here for 5 years. And I said, I'm just going to be honest with you. So I know you get these shitty little cases, with $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, where big clients say, handle this for me. And I know they're just a pain for you guys. Give me those cases for a couple of years. I'll handle all of them. And they bought it. And they gave me these, $50,000 cases, which is nothing for the firm. But for me, I got to try cases. And wow. I spent a lot of time in court and handling actual cases on my own as a young lawyer. And so once I was representing the city of Catalina, because the firm did a lot of municipal law. And we were suing, along with 19 other plaintiffs, the SS Catalina, because they owed everybody money and they were going under. And I think they filed for bankruptcy and everybody was trying to get money. And so this is my first taste of the media where where the media got interested just because the SS Catalina was a big landmark. And there were these 19 old guys and me. And I said, guys, I'll handle the media on this one. And I used to go down to the courthouse steps and I would talk to the media, and it was hysterical. It was hysterical. So I thought, I kind of like this. This is fun.
You know, the guy, it's funny, as long as we're reminiscing, we can end with this. The guy who I always thought was early money on handling media when it came to criminal cases, at least, was Howard Weitzman.
Oh.
And I remember the DeLorean case, and Howard and Don Ray.
Yeah, don't forget Don Ray.
Yeah, well, Don is one of the great lawyers of.
And Howard would come down those steps. That's when I was a reporter, and I used to interview Howard every day in the courthouse steps, thinking, "Oh, they are going to so lose this case." That didn't happen.
I mean, that was talk about having
on camera.
Videotape. It was on camera.
You see the cocaine deal.
Yeah, this is better than gold or something.
It was exactly that. And they're looking at cocaine, and there's an FBI agent, and DeLorean wins. That was just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then Howard, after that case, went back to, I think, Michigan and tried yet another case and got him acquitted back there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was back to back with that case, got no attention, but back to back.
Okay, we're showing our age.
Great Howard Weitzman.
We're showing our age. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Because he's
moment in the beginning where you were able to speak to some of us reporters, and then very early on it was clear. I think our last interview was me walking and talking with you, and you just talking about the defense that you were building, and that was it after that.
Yeah, we were pretty shut down during the trial by design. You know, we had asked the judge actually for a little bit of a gag order, and the judge gave it to us, so we had to and wanted to sort of abide by that and kind of keep it out of the press. I mean, try the case in the courtroom, which we feel that we did.
So, of course, I want to start with July 2nd.
Okay.
You go up to the microphone. There's about a dozen microphones there. Everyone's smiling.
Right.
You step up first. You're the lead attorney for this case. Mm-hmm. Today is a great victory. It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system. You said you saw this coming.
Yeah, I saw it coming.
That morning.
I did. I saw it coming. I saw it coming that morning when the jury said that they had verdicts on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, but not on count 1. I thought that it must be that they split on the Mann Acts on the one side and then the sex trafficking on the other side. Because if it would have been all the way one or the other, they would have agreed, I think, on the racketeering conspiracy. Mm-hmm. So my guess was that they convicted him of the prostitution, the Mann Act counts, and acquitted on the sex trafficking.
Take me back to just that moment, because I've heard you talk about how you didn't really sleep a lot during this trial.
True.
And that you typically don't sleep a lot to begin with. But what went into this case? It had to be, I'm sure, the most publicized in the 35 years that you've been practicing law.
True. Yes, definitely the most publicized of my entire career, by a long way. I mean, Ranieri was publicized, Martin Shkreli was publicized. I've been blessed to have a lot of cases that people care about, but nothing close to this. And the press was every little thing. I mean, I thought the press was very aware of what was going on in the courtroom. They covered it very closely. I thought they covered it actually fairly accurately. And so it was a tremendous amount of preparation, a lot of pressure trying to keep the team together, a lot of pressure because, Sean Combs, I mean, I believed in my heart that he was innocent. The prostitution's tricky, but we're still sort of fighting that. And so there's a lot of pressure to win. And that's what this was all about.
For people who were not inside the courtroom, there was cheering, praying, celebration. There was a moment where Combs had his hand up, and in real time, we're watching as a decision is made and he's not going to speak. It seemed like he wanted to say something in that moment. Is that true, or what was going on?
I think he did. I think he wanted to speak to the judge. I think he's not someone who's used to people speaking on his behalf. I mean, I think he became Sean Combs, and he built all the things that he built by being the front and center guy. And this was a real adjustment for him. And so I think it's not natural for him to sit back and let others speak on his behalf. But we also told him that was best and that's what was going to happen. And he agreed.
Was this the most challenging case that you've ever tried in your career?
That's a great question. It's up there. I mean, I've had missile trafficking, trials. I've had political corruption trials. When I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted serial killer hitmen, so they're all different. This was probably the most difficult in terms of, getting the team together. I never had a defense team like in this case, and I was lucky to have such a great group of lawyers. But
from all over the country.
From all over the country. I mean, we had Brian Steele and Nicole Westmoreland from Atlanta. I mean, gifted, great lawyers. We had Xavier Donaldson, Alexander Shapiro, Jason Driscoll, Anna Esteval, me and Tenny. And so we really had this great group of lawyers, but we needed a leader, and I'm not really a natural leader. I'm just not. I'm a trial lawyer. It's different. It's a different skill set. And I've never really tried to be a leader or had to be a leader. I'm a soldier, and I'm proud to be a soldier. So this was a different role, and I had to kind of step into the role. I mean, I kind of saw my team needed that, and we needed harmony. We needed, we have great lawyers who are used to all being front and center. We all needed, including myself. Right. We have to leave our egos at the door. We have to do what's best for Mr. Combs. And so that was challenging. And then, the government was very well prepared. They had 6 outstanding prosecutors. I mean, it's a marquee case for what many say is the best prosecutor's office maybe in the world, the Southern District of New York. And this is probably their biggest case of the, not so new century. And so it was high stakes. It's Game 7 in Yankee Stadium. And so it's pressure.
The stakes are still high. Presently,
true.
Just this week, the judge, Arun Subramanian, said no to bail. Second time that he's done this.
It's true.
How many times have you sought bail for Sean Combs?
So I've counted because I've never been 0 for 5 in a case in my career. And I've tried to get bail for Mr. Combs 5 times, and I'm 0 for 5. So, I made the Yankee Stadium reference. If I was up at bat, an 0 for 5, outing is not so great.
Does that hurt you later with sentencing, just because you have made these arguments over and over again, obviously with different judges, but with this judge twice, and more recently, the judge cited evidence of violence and coercion, and said that concerns about Combs' safety, the judge said that he acknowledged the staff had been able to keep him safe even during an incident of threatened violence from an inmate. So in your opinion, you speak to Sean Combs often. What is going on at the Metropolitan Detention Center that you're saying you believe he's in danger?
So he's a very public personality, and it was a very public trial. I think that there is always the risk that some people are going to be envious or jealous, maybe jealous that he might be going home before they do. And so, I think it's been more challenging for the outstanding staff at the MDC to kind of step up, do the things that they need to do to keep, Mr. Combs safe. And they've been doing that, and they've been outstanding with us. And I know that they get their, more than their share of grief from time to time, but they've been very, very good with us and very, very good with Mr. Combs, and I really appreciate the way they've handled things. But it's a challenging situation.
Had you brought that issue up before, though, or is this something that had been building because of recent incidents? You talked about in your document, you said that there was an inmate that was stabbed just above Combs. So help us understand sort of from September of 2024 to now how things have changed and why that's something that you brought up.
I think that's largely the other stabbing. I think is largely anecdotal. I don't know that has anything to do with our case or Mr. Combs. I think it does not have anything to do with it.
Okay.
But what I've seen, and what he tells me is that it's a little different ever since the verdict. And maybe it's because he's perceived.
Good or bad?
a little more tense, not from the staff, but from certain people, other inmates. And so, I think that there are a lot of people who really support him among the inmate population. I think a lot of inmates take faith and heart in the fact that someone has won. I mean, all they really tend to see is they lose. You go to trial and you lose, and that's what they see. And so the fact that Mr. Combs won his trial largely, not completely, of course, I think is seen as giving everybody a little bit of hope. That being said, I think that there's lots of different ways people can feel.
What about this consistent thread that Judge Submaranian continues to say? The judge has said the first time when he denied bail that there was an issue of violence and coercion, and he used those same words this week. Right. Your thoughts on that? So
my thoughts are, he was convicted of, he was acquitted of coercion. I mean, that was the sex trafficking count, and a jury of 12 New Yorkers acquitted him of that. Now, I don't think that is going to play a role at the sentencing because he's being sentenced on straight prostitution. But in terms of
the violence, though, which you acknowledged in court when you opening statements, not from you, but Tenage, this is not about racketeering conspiracy. Was there domestic violence? Absolutely.
No question.
You own that.
We owned it. We owned it then. We own it now. I mean, I said it in the closing, and I say it now. That it's large. It's in the past for the most part. There's one event that happened in the summer of 2024 where the woman called Jane admits that she provoked, something that ended up being violent on both sides. His relationships were toxic. He's not proud of that. There was mutual violence, but that doesn't excuse a man being violent toward a woman ever. And we never said that it did. And so at the end of the day, he started seeking help, counseling. He was in a program before he was arrested in this case. He was productive. He was going. I'm in touch with the people in the program. And I think that when he gets out, he's going to start that again. I mean, the programming at the MDC is not great. It's really almost non-existent. So we've put together, therapists and people who go in and speak to Mr. Combs. And
how often?
Every 2 weeks. I mean, it's pretty regular. And we did it during the trial, but before the trial as well. And so and I think it's helpful. I mean, I think it's what he needs. I was in the DA's office when I was 25 years old, and I probably had 200 cases. I bet 30 of them were domestic violence, mostly committed by men. And so this is a well-worn path, in the criminal justice system of men being violent with their domestic partners. And I think the best way to deal with it is therapy, counseling. A lot of times their partners don't want them to go to jail. They want them to get help. They want them to get better. They want them to be the men that they fell in love with, and that's really what I want for Mr. Combs.
When's the last time you spoke to him?
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Today.
What did he say?
We were just talking about, sentencing and some of the questions you're asking about, what does the judge's ruling on bail, how does that relate to sentencing? And I explained to him it really is two completely different things, and it's two different sort of bodies of laws and rules. So, the bases by which a judge can keep someone in jail are very different than the bases on which the judge sentences the person.
Do you speak to him every day?
Every day, several times a day.
Does he know you're doing this interview?
I think he does, but not from me.
Okay.
I think he was told.
Is there anything that he can say that he wanted to get through, because you are now speaking more publicly about the case and just sort of what's next? But maybe a better question, what is it that Sean Combs wants people to know? Because he's, limited to what he can say.
Yeah. So he wants people to know that I think that he has reflected on the blessings that he's been given, on the imperfections that I think he sees in himself, just like we all have. I think he wants to be a better, more present father than he's ever been. I think he wants to start small. I think he wants to get out of jail, reestablish, a loving, present relationship with all of his 7 children. He wants to take care of his mother. His mother is she's going to get mad at me. She's getting older. but she's beautiful and fashionable as always. But he wants to get back in his life. I think the larger goals are down the road. Does he want to get back into music? Does he want to get back into business? I think he's someone who is always going to strive to do something, exceptional and probably demanding and challenging. But I think the most demanding and challenging thing in front of him right now is to get back with his kids and get back with his mother and the people who love him and miss him.
So he's talked to you about getting back into music if he's released, if he's free?
No, honestly, he has not.
Okay.
One thing he said he's going to be back in Madison Square Garden.
He said that?
He did. He said to me he's going to be back in Madison Square Garden.
Doing what?
I guess being on stage, and I said I'll be there. I want to be right in the front. So we'll see. We'll make it happen.
So you talk to him every day. How long do these conversations typically last?
Sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 15 minutes, usually several times a day. Either on something called the VTC. It's like a Zoom setup. I go see him. I'm going to see him tomorrow morning. So I spend a lot of time physically with him in the jail, but also on these videos.
Mark, I know there's been so much celebration about what he was acquitted of, but he's still facing 2 felony convictions. Each count carries up to 10 years behind bars. Are you preparing him for the worst, or are you optimistic that he's not going to get a lot of time, if any time, or he'll get a pardon?
Right. The pardon, that's not my end of the business. I know really nothing about that.
But you're the lead attorney, and Nicole Westmoreland said that there have been conversations.
She did. I know mostly what I know from what the president has said.
But wait, how are you the lead attorney? And she's saying that the team has had conversations with the White House, with the administration.
I can just tell you what I have had conversations with nobody.
You haven't spoken to the president?
I have not. No, not. I have not spoken to the president. I have not spoken to anybody who speaks to the president about Sean Combs. I have not.
So she said, and I just want to quote, Nicole Westmoreland, who's part of the team, said that it's her understanding that we have reached out and had conversations, that they have spoken to people who would be responsible for the pardon process. And at a time where I think there's a lot of attention, not just on the president and his actions, but on what will happen here with Sean Combs, you mean to tell me that you really have nothing to do with a possible pardon right now?
Nothing. I have nothing to do with a possible pardon. I have my hands full with sentencing and bail. Really, I'm not involved at all. So,
okay.
Like I said, I know it's in.
You would be honest with me, right?
Of course I would. I'm on TV.
Okay.
I know it's out there.
Right.
I know it's out there. I know that every once in a while the president will say something about it. I don't know how seriously the president's taking it. I don't know kind of where his mind is with it, but I know that I want to work really hard to get him a good sentence.
What is Sean Combs saying about the possibility of the pardon? Is he asking you, the team, see what you can do by any means necessary? Like, what is his take on what he's willing to do or go through to be free?
I think he knows I'm not political, so he doesn't talk to me about it at all. We've never discussed it other than I tell him what's in the news about it. And
what's his reaction? Does he laugh? Does he say, let's look into it? What does he say?
Go tell him that I need a pardon. Go tell him I deserve a pardon. That's what he said. Go tell him I deserve a pardon. And I say, all right, so let's talk about your sentencing.
So you steer him back to what you're facing right now?
Yes, very much so. I'm a one-trick pony. I really am. I'm a courtroom guy. That's what I do. That's my forum. That's all I know. I'm a registered independent. I'm not political, and so I don't do anything about that.
So going back to the serious nature still of felony convictions, how are you preparing him? Are you telling him, listen, it could be on the higher side, it could be consecutively versus concurrently?
So, I tell him what the guidelines are, and the guidelines are about 2 or 3 years. And I tell him, the judge could go above the guidelines. That's rare, but possible. the judge could go below the guidelines. That's less rare in the Southern District of New York, and possible. And, the emphasis now is the same as the emphasis on the trial, is just to put the best effort forward to show Judge Subramanian all the reasons why, leniency is appropriate, why the violence is in his past, why he's dealing with the violence. And at the end of the day, he wasn't convicted for anything having to do with violence. I mean, the jury affirmatively acquitted him of all of that. So we have to make all of those arguments the right way, the legal way, to the court.
Because this bail was denied, and that's what sort of we're dealing with now, it's less than 60 days before October 3rd is still the day. What do you think will happen on sentencing day?
I can't possibly, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I think Judge Subramanian's been fair throughout. He'll be fair here. Our fate is in our own hands, I feel. I feel like if we do a good job explaining the situation to our judge, I think we'll get a fair and reasonable sentence. I hope Mr. Combs goes home soon. I think he's paid a tremendous debt for what he's done. He's done things wrong. He was convicted of crimes, and he's done other things wrong. And we were forthcoming, as part of our trial presentation as to all of that. And I think in some ways he's a better person because of it.
What does he tell his children?
I actually don't know. I mean, I know he talks to them a lot. They're very present in his life.
I was going to say, day one, we saw 6 of his 7 children in the courtroom. You said that in your conversations with him, he talks about, wanting to establish that relationship, wanting to get back home. How difficult, I guess, has that been for him, trying to father behind bars, from behind bars?
It's very difficult because 4 of the kids, with him in jail, 4 of the kids have no parents at all. I mean, their mother passed away, and Mr. Combs is in jail.
Porter.
Correct. And I think he feels very, very bad about that. And I think he feels like he really wants to get back so that those kids have a parent, present to be their father, because they don't have a mother at this point, which is, tragic in general, but doubly tragic because, Mr. Combs is in jail.
A number of friends and family, I understand, have submitted letters. Were those was that for the bail hearing? Was that for the sentencing?
So it's for the sentencing.
And what are we to make of someone who accused Combs of domestic violence 5 years ago in a podcast, who then wrote a letter saying he's a good person, and today I believe doubled down on an Instagram post saying, why can't people accept that you can forgive people and move on? For those who will look at a letter from someone who was supposed to be victim number 3 in this case and go, she must have been paid, or the attorney clearly wrote that letter, what do you say to that?
She wasn't paid and the attorney didn't write it. I mean, I know she has a lawyer. I don't know between her and her lawyer how that letter was made, but I have every reason to believe that those are her genuine sentiments. And if her lawyer helped her write it, that sometimes happens. I think she's exactly right. And I think she would know. And I don't think she's here to just do him favors. I think this is how she genuinely feels. And I thought that her letter was very balanced. I think she said, was their relationship perfect? It wasn't perfect. I mean, and she led with that. And she said, but he always tried to do better. She saw him as a father and a loving figure. And I think this is all about redemption. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I believe in redemption. And I think this is a story of redemption. And I think that's what he wants. He's religious as well. He was raised Catholic and Baptist. He went to Catholic high school. He went to Catholic church every Sunday. He went to Baptist church as well because of his grandmother. And I think he is telling a story of redemption. I think the Sean Combs story is a story of redemption and how important redemption is. And redemption as a function of character, both for the person who's asking for the redemption and for the people who we are asking to redeem that person. And I don't think it's a great gesture of character to carry anger. I think that's what Gina's follow-up is saying. I think it's a great gesture of character if someone really deserves redemption to let them achieve that. And that's really the Combs story right now, is one of redemption.
I want to go back to that last day in court for you, giving your closing argument, 4.5 hours. I heard in another interview that you had something ready and then you weren't comfortable with it. And you went on a walk and you just came with what you said is, tell me a story.
Right.
You know, wanting to connect with the jury, which you believe, you know, you had the shared experience with. Some criticized, you know, what you had to say and how you said it. I remember doing an Instagram post myself where you talked about, oh, the Astroglide is off the streets, you know, and you said it in a way that was kind of mocking the fact that a lot went into raiding someone's home and this is what they found. When you look back at that, explain to us, to the viewers, why you felt it was so important to not necessarily have everything written down, not stay behind the podium, but to use your hands to move back and forth. Again, there were no cameras in the courtroom, so we are the eyes and ears for the public. But what went into that? How you were feeling? I mean, to be up there for 4.5 hours.
I had prepared an outline, and the night before I read it over, and it was factually fine, but it was stale. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't a great story. And I just wanted to tell the jury the story. And so I knew what I wanted to say.
Right.
And I knew that the jury had paid very close attention. So they didn't need me to put emails up on the screen for them to see for the 23rd time. The text messages or whatever the written communications were, they knew that stuff. And they paid very close attention to the testimony. They all took notes. All, 17 jurors took notes throughout the entire trial. So they knew this stuff. What they didn't hear, and I didn't think the government really gave them a story, they didn't hear the story of this case, and so I just wanted to tell them a story. And I wanted to put my notes down, I only had 3 pages of handwritten notes anyway, and talk to them and look them in the face and, kind of look at them individually and sort of say, this is the story of this case. This is what the evidence shows. There's
a moment I think lawyers know when they have the audience, the jury. When was that for you?
So it's funny. It's a good question. I wasn't sure if I was going to be sarcastic or not. I wanted to sort of see how it would go. So when I was cross-examining one of the agents, I asked him, I said, so how many cases, how many search warrants have you recovered Astroglide? And he says, 1. I go, this one. And he was did terrorism cases and all these serious cases. And so I realized, and the jury kind of laughed at that. And so I realized that's going to be my jumping off point because I already have that kind of in the record. So early in my summation, I did the whole thing with, thank goodness they got the Astroglide, they got it off the street. And the jury reacted, well. They laughed, they kind of got it. And there's aspects of this trial. I mean, sarcasm could be a very effective tool, and as a storyteller, you want to use your full complement of tools. And it's sincerity and it's sometimes
and that's just not right. And it's
Joel Westmoreland was a leading member of Diddy's all-star defense team, which delivered what Trump called a sort of victory in court. And she joins me now. Welcome to Uncensored.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Oh, very good. I just wondered where you think you are in terms of what is going to happen in October with the sentencing. Because obviously, potentially, Sean Diddy Combs could face a significant period of time in prison. Are you anticipating that, or are you anticipating a more lenient sentence, or are you anticipating that President Trump may still intervene and issue a full pardon?
Well, we anticipate that on October 3rd, hopefully he'll be coming home.
But in terms of he wouldn't get a prison sentence at all?
We do not think that he should spend another day in jail. Not at all.
But he has been convicted of crimes. People will say, well, why shouldn't he go to jail?
Well, you know, I think that the Mann Act was not this type of behavior, number one, and that I think you'll find out very shortly that there is no one that we've been able to locate or identify, no case where someone is in jail for the same behavior as Mr. Combs. And so that's not fair, and that's not right.
Is that actually right, that nobody that you've been able to find has ever been sent to prison for the things that he's been convicted of?
Listen, we've looked long and hard. As you know, the judge sent us on a mission to find cases, and that's due September 1st. But listen, we have not been able to locate a case where anyone is in jail for this type of behavior. And, you know, the DOJ policy manual doesn't even, you know, they say do not prosecute this type of behavior. So, no, we haven't been able to find an individual, not a single one.
In relation to the reports, I saw you on CNN yesterday saying that there had been conversations with the Trump administration. Are you able to say who those conversations were with?
No, I'm not in the weeds on that to that extent. I'm part of the trial team, and right now we're laser focused on preparing for October 3rd.
Right, but it's obviously in the remit of the President of the United States to issue a full pardon should he wish to. He's certainly given some slightly ambiguous statements, President Trump, indicating that it's not something he has completely ruled out. But he did make a point of saying that he was aware that despite their previous friendship, that Sean Combs had said some pretty negative things about Trump. I went and did some research and found what those were. In 2017, when Trump had been president in his first year of his first term, he said to the Daily Beast, to be honest, we don't really give a F about Trump because black people are in the same effed up position. And in October 2020, he told Charlemagne the God, the radio host, that white men like Trump need to be banished, and the #1 priority is to get Trump out of office. He said the real way of thinking is real dangerous. This man literally threatened the lives of us and our families about going to vote. We're in a war of love versus hate. The #1 priority is to get Trump out of office. You know, if you're Donald Trump, why, if you reread those comments, should you contemplate a potential pardon?
Because you want to do what's right and what's fair, and you're not going to let anything cloud those decision makings. And so, you know,
Okay, so I would say from your response that you are quite hopeful that he will get pardoned by Donald Trump.
I think being pardoned would be the right thing to do. So we're hopeful.
It would be an extraordinary thing if he is pardoned. There were many reports, as you know, before the time came for the jury verdict, that he was looking at potentially spending the rest of his life in prison. A lot of the public opinion, I think, was clouded by the horrendous video of him attacking his then girlfriend in a hotel corridor. You have spoken courageously yourself about your own experience with abuse. When you watch that video as a woman, notwithstanding the fact that you've been part of his team, what does that make you feel personally about Sean Diddy Combs in the way that he has been violent towards women?
You know, I know, because I've spent a lot of time speaking with him and I've spent a lot of time with him. I know that he knows that that was wrong. Bottom line, it was wrong. There are no excuses. And I appreciate that he knows that. I feel very confident that nothing similar, anything like that would ever happen again. And I know that it did not take him being arrested. It did not take him being indicted. It didn't take the tape coming out for him to immediately know that he was wrong, immediately be remorseful, and immediately know that he needed some help. And so all the way back then in 2016, right after that situation, Mr. Combs checked himself in and he started getting help. And so that's what I know. And I'm happy that he started getting help and that he knew that and that he's continued to get help. And that's what I know. And that's what I appreciate, that he, you know, he was not sober. He was not sober then. And he has made a decision for himself to get his life together, and he's been doing that. And that's how, you know, that's what I know, and that's how I feel about it.
A lot of people have painted a pretty dark picture of what he was like in that period, that he was, you know, we've all read about the freak-off parties, we've read about the violence, intimidation, and so on. Do you genuinely believe he's a reformed character? Some will say, you know, lepers don't change their spots, that if he gets out and doesn't have to face any jail time or be held accountable for the things he's been found guilty of, notwithstanding you saying there's no precedent for jailing somebody in that position, they will say that if you put it all together, you've got a guy that behaved pretty badly, who ultimately, if he walks free, will have had no actual genuine accountability. What do you say to people that have that concern?
Well, I think that we need to break that down a little bit, because what was going on and the privacy of his bedroom with his girlfriends, consensual adults, you know, I don't think we should put that in the same category. Now, is he human? Yes. Did he make some mistakes in his life? Absolutely. Is he getting help for those mistakes? Yes. And so I think that we have to look at it, you know, from that perspective, and not start, you know, to say that everything that he did, including, you know, sex with his girlfriends, was something wrong. That's their bedroom.
Do you believe
do you want the federal government in your bedroom?
Yeah, I was going to say, no, absolutely not. And do you feel that what the trial established was that actually, despite the claim of the people who were making allegations against him, that everything actually the jury determined turned out in their eyes to be consensual? It may not be everyone's cup of tea. It might not be the kind of behavior in a bedroom that some people find acceptable, but it didn't cross the line of being criminal, and it was all consensual.
Absolutely. That's why the jury found him not guilty of sex trafficking. No force, no fraud, no coercion. Those were two grown ladies. They were his girlfriends. And, you know, the jury saw straight through sex trafficking. So, yes, it was consensual, and it was not illegal what they were doing, although that may not be what everybody's doing in their bedrooms. Totally understand that. But it was not criminal.
How significant do you think the testimony of the guy the escort who called himself the Punisher was? Because I interviewed him and I believed him. I thought he was very credible, and he certainly painted a very different picture of what had gone on to the way Cassie Ventura had described it. He made it clear that in his eyes, she was the person who organized everything, booked him, paid for it, and seemed very happy about everything, thoroughly enjoyed all their encounters over, I think, a 2-year period. I felt he was both in the court, but also in subsequent interviews, a pretty powerful advocate for your defense.
Agreed. You know, I'll tell you, I really do not know why the government called him, but glad they did. So, agree. I think he was powerful, and I think he said a lot. Yeah.
I mean, the irony is he was called for the prosecution. and yet he turned out to be a powerful weapon for you guys.
Agreed.
How is Sean Diddy Combs in himself now? He's been in prison for a sustained period of time. He's not been with his family. He's got a lot of kids. You know, how would you characterize his state of mind?
Wow, this is definitely the hardest situation he's ever been through in his life. You know, I think that he's trying to stay positive. He is trying to continue to fight. He's trying to be a father from jail, which is very hard and very complicated. And so, you know, I think that he's doing a lot of thinking, and he's continuing to work on himself, and, you know, he's still trying to be a parent and, you know, just get his life together. But this is definitely, this is the hardest thing he's been through in his life, and I think that he's taking it a day at a time.
Were you surprised that a federal judge on Monday denied the motion to allow him to be released on bail? The prosecutors argued he was a flight risk and a danger. The judge said that you guys had failed to show sufficient evidence to counter the argument that he's a flight risk. But on the danger point, there was a letter from his ex-girlfriend, Virginia Huyn, to the judge, urging his release, saying he didn't represent a danger. Were you surprised, given all that he wasn't allowed out?
You know, I think that the judge made his decision. You know, what I really take issue with is the prosecution. I take issue with the prosecution bringing this case in the first place. So I think the judge, you know, made whatever decision that he felt like he needed to. But I think that the real issue is the prosecution having this type of discretion and being able to engage in selective prosecution and targeted prosecution and you know, to have that type of power. I think that's the real issue.
I just want to play again. This is the actual clip of Donald Trump talking about the possibility of a pardon.
You know, I was very friendly with him. I got along with him great, and seemed like a nice guy. I didn't know him well, but when I ran for office, he was very hostile. He made some terrible statements. So I don't know. It's more difficult. It makes it more. I'm being honest. It makes it more difficult to do.
But more likely a no for Combs,
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah. Finally, what is your message to Donald Trump if he's watching this?
To look at the case and make his decisions from there. I think that pardon him would be the right thing to do, given the history of the Mann Act. You know, if I'm not mistaken, President Trump pardoned Jack Johnson, and the Mann Act was used against him. And so, you know, if he has the opportunity to look through the case and make his decisions from there. I think looking through the case and the history of the Mann Act and where we are now, and that this type of behavior, you know, is not being prosecuted. It's not. Mr. Combs was prosecuted because he's Sean Puffy Combs, and that's just not right, and it's not fair, and he does not deserve to be where he is right now because of the Mann Act. He just doesn't deserve that, and so we just like fairness. We like fairness, and I'm hopeful that, you know, at the end of the day, that a fair outcome will come from this, and that somehow this will turn itself around to be something positive.
Nicole Westmoreland, I really appreciate you coming on Uncensored. It was a very interesting interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
President Trump is also reportedly considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving 20 years for facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of young girls. Maxwell was quietly moved to a low-security prison last week. Bill and Hillary Clinton have now been subpoenaed by a congressional committee investigating the Epstein files farce. And elsewhere in legal news, my interview with Candace Owens, who's facing a massive defamation suit from the Macrons, has certainly got people talking. Many think that the French president has overreached. Many say Candace is doomed. Well, joining me to discuss all of these legal issues is a panel of legal minds: a criminal defense lawyer, Mark Eiglash, the criminal attorney, Bruce Rivers, and entertainment law expert,